Thank you so much, Stanley. Hi, everyone. I am a brand new professor here at San Diego State, so I'm really excited to be here and back in my home state of California. And as you'll see, I do my research on California. So what I'm going to tell you about tonight is how California has been what I like to call a reluctant leader in reducing our reliance on mass incarceration. So since this is an NPR-like audience, I imagine that many of you are familiar with the fact that we, as the United States, incarcerate way more people per population and in raw numbers than any other country in the world. From 1973 to 2009, our incarceration rate quadrupled. 1 in 100 Americans is behind bars. And this escalates when we talk about differences in race and ethnicity. So black people are incarcerated at a rate 6 times that of white people. Hispanics and Latinos are incarcerated at a rate 3 times that of white people. And women, who I study, have long been the fastest growing portion of the prison population. And I'm happy to talk more about kind of the causes or the contributors to the mass incarceration phenomenon, but the war on drugs may ring a bell with some of you. And so what I'm going to tell you about tonight is how California is has become this reluctant leader in an effort to reduce mass incarceration. So at the peak of our reliance on mass incarceration in California, scenes like this were common throughout the state. California has 33 prisons. Prior to 2011, which is a big change I'm going to be telling you about, 5 of California's 33 prisons were at 200% of their design capacity, and 20-some others were at 150% capacity. The California Institution for Men, also known as Chino, as you can see, had to take up housing prisoners in their gymnasium. And so in 2011, in response to a Supreme Court ruling that was going to be handed down in a case called Brown v. Plata, the California legislature passed a law called the Public Safety Realignment Act. You may hear it referred to as AB 109 or Assembly Bill 109. And what that law does is essentially shifts responsibility for low-level felony offenders, so most typically nonviolent drug offenders, shifts responsibility for those people from state to county custody. And I should say that the Supreme Court ruling in Brown v. Plata, which followed quickly on the heels of California passing public safety realignment, found that situations like this constitute cruel and unusual punishment. So being a state prisoner in California violates your 8th Amendment rights. And that's because people were dying in prisons because they weren't getting access to basic health care. Okay? So in response to this ruling, this very seminal occurrence that happened in our state, we started shifting responsibility for people from the state to the counties. So kind of shifting the problem along with it. Right? And so what I study, I'm an ethnographer, so I traffic in kind of words and people's feelings and perceptions and experiences of big policy changes like this. So I recently completed an ethnographic study of women who were getting out under this new law, and also women who were getting out under kind of the old style of being on state parole. So the new style for people being shifted is to be on a new form of county probation. So this kind of intensive supervision. And so what I did was I followed women around in the first days, weeks, and months of them getting out of either prison or jail. What I did was I would do in-depth interviews with the women, and I would also observe them doing what I call the work of reentry. So let me show you a little bit about what that looks like. So the work of reentry involves several different discrete tasks. You can't accomplish all the tasks in one spot. There is no one-stop shopping for people who are reentering from prison or jail. I like to use the image of a shattered mirror a fractured mirror to illustrate the ways in which people have to interact with all these different institutions. And all these institutions tend to kind of compete and contradict with each other when you're getting out of prison. So your parole agent or your probation officer wants you to come to his or her office regularly to check in, to show him that you're complying, to pee in a cup, to do drug testing. He may want you to go to someplace else to do substance abuse treatment counseling or mental health counseling. You probably don't have a car, and if you live in some place like San Diego, that means taking a bus or two for an hour each way, right? Schlepping around. And then if you're a woman, like the women that I studied, you might want to reunify with your children. Okay, so that means another task on top of all these other things that you need to do, going to family court, showing that you're going to be a good parent, okay? And so the women that I studied, that I followed around, did all of this, applied for public assistance, looking for a job, going to try to enroll in school, and also doing all of this with the mark of a criminal record, okay? And so this is a really exciting time in California. Realignment has caused this to happen. So this is the same gym I showed you at the beginning. Problem solved, right? No, that is not the case. Okay, so we've taken people out of prison who probably shouldn't have been there to begin with in terms of helping them with the problems that got them into trouble to begin with. But now we need to start thinking of a different justice system, a crime processing system that deserves to have justice in its name. Okay, so I spend a lot of time thinking about how we can build a more inclusive, restorative, preventative justice system. So if I'm going to leave you with kind of 3 take-home points tonight, right, just hitting the high points, and then you can ask me questions, I want you to know that California has become a reluctant leader, right? We didn't do so of our own volition. This was a Supreme Court ruling that issued this. And in a kind of a side project, I'm documenting the discourses around public safety that have come along with realignment. So when AB 109 was passed, a lot of local politicians and leaders were warning people to get a dog, get a gun, get an alarm system, and just basically hunker down because these people are coming out and it's going to be chaos in the streets. Another politician likened it to, what did he say? It's like the violent bar scene in Star Wars, except everyone's going to be crazy and nuts, right? So this was what we were prepared for. This happened 4 years ago. Crime is at historically low levels. In San Diego, crime is at its lowest since the 1960s, okay? So realignment has not caused this enormous leap in the crime rates that we thought it would. And so let's start thinking about something different, okay? So our concern with public safety comes at the expense of giving this substantive assistance to people who have been criminalized so that they don't return to prison and so that they can live a life that isn't at the margins, okay? Thank you.
Questions? A friend of mine was telling me this weekend about a volunteer program at Chino that she is involved in. It's actually not with these low-risk individuals, it's with murderers. And she's being trained to go in and teach these people about living better lives and so forth.
Once they get out,
or maybe allowing them to potentially get on parole. There's a list of 100 people waiting to get into this program. It's extraordinarily popular, I don't think just to get them out, but they seem to be learning things. So it made me wonder that, and she's a volunteer, why the government is relying on volunteers for such an important thing, and whether that's going to be transferred to the types of cases that you're dealing with as the ultimate solution, rather than using the professionals.
So let me show you another slide that I had ready. So is just our incarceration rates. This is men and women over time from 1978 to now. During this era, you might recall in the 80s and 90s, we were very concerned about crime, right? And so the Clintons, both Clintons have kind of come out and said, hey, we lobbied for this very punitive style of sentencing. We were very anti-criminal, anti-redemption, lock them up, throw away the key. And during that time, we basically got rid of all the rehabilitative services that were happening in prisons. And so now we're slowly recognizing that, hey, rehabilitation needs to happen, but in most cases I think we're relying on volunteers. And we need to kind of institutionalize the idea that rehabilitative services need to happen in prison, that a lot of times you'll hear scholars of criminal justice say some things like reentry starts at intake, right? So the moment you enter the criminal justice system, we should be thinking about how to prepare you to get out. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, but you see volunteers getting involved.
Which is wonderful. We need more people like that.
You mentioned that we have, both the U.S. and California, the highest number of people in prison and the highest incarceration rate. Can you give us a little insight why that is compared to other industrialized countries?
How much time do you have?
Or a few insights would be helpful.
Okay, so I'll answer it one way. So different cultures have different perspectives on punishment and the forms that punishment should take. So when we talk about different theories of what makes good punishment, we can talk about things like retribution, deterrence, incapacitation. And so in this country, we have a strong undercurrent of retribution and incapacitation. And so we think that by kind of locking up a lot of people, we're going to prevent crime. And the science has really not borne out that relationship.
So even with comparable countries like Canada, for instance, similar societies, races, there's a dramatic, so it's a question of philosophy and approach.
I believe it's the philosophy of punishment and what we think as Americans, people kind of need to get their just desserts when they commit a crime. And that kind of follows through to when people get out of prison. You know, we talk about collateral consequences of being incarcerated, some of which are being repealed, but depending on where you go in this country, you still have to report that you have a criminal record before you can even interview for a job. In a lot of states, if you have a felony drug conviction, you cannot get food stamps. Even if you're destitute and poor, you can't get food stamps for life. California just repealed that last year.
Megan, it doesn't make sense to me. I understand the decrease in the prison population, but why the lowest level of crime that we've ever seen? I mean,
I also have a graph on that.
Aren't necessarily
I thought people might be curious. So these are property crimes. The gold line is California's property crime rate. The blue line is the U.S. property crime rate, and then these are the violent crime rates.
But why?
Criminologists do not agree. You ask 10 different criminologists, you'll get 10 different answers. I think it's cyclical because we see low crime across the world. All different cultures are experiencing this historically low crime rate, and I think that there are a lot of different factors that play into that, but criminologists have tried to isolate one variable. They've tried to isolate the incarceration variable and found that it really does not hold up. That incarceration has a small effect on reducing crime, right? If you incapacitate a large amount of our population, sure, you're going to reduce some crime, but not all of it. Economic reasons, kind of the same.
I will speak loud. We know that public safety costs a lot of money now. So, can science contribute, like, to make prisoners work, and of course not to get our jobs, but do some like, say, instead of importing the migrant workers to harvest their, say, strawberries, can we give these jobs to the prisoners so that they can get out of the room, so they learn some skill, they find their values, rather than they are having no hope?
I don't think that we need to displace anyone, anyone who currently occupies a position working in agriculture. I think we need to think about, and perhaps our entrepreneurs can help us think about, how to bring more jobs back into the U.S. That we have outsourced to foreign countries, and also paying people a living wage to do the hard work that a lot of us are fortunate to not have to do.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Thanks.